Welcome to the Beer Frontier. My name is Gage.
And I'm Robert, and as ever, we're here for the beer. This week, we're going to be looking at Imperial Stout.
We're going to visit Ben the home brewer and see what he does.
We're going to be tasting some Australian Imperial Stouts.
We're going up to look at Enzo to see what he can cook.
And we've got a Japanese Imperial Stout to try as well.
And we're going to visit a microbrewery. Imperial Stout is one of the two main styles of stouts. We've got dry stout and Imperial Stout. An example of dry stout is Guinness, but we're not talking about those ones today. It's more the Imperial Stouts, which are those very rich malty beers which are quite higher alcohol, typically 6 or even 7%, and the flavour comes from the roasted barley malt. It's not so much hops driven or yeast driven, and it gives you very big, robust coffee chocolate type flavours. Yeah, very interesting beers.
Okay, and how come they're called Imperial Stouts?
Oh, they were first brewed in the 18th century in London for export to Russia for the court of Catherine the Great. And they, incidentally, the higher alcohol content, I believe, was to stop the beers freezing as they crossed the Baltic.
Oh, I see. And I know most viewers will be familiar with Invalid Stout. How does this fit into the picture?
Ah, Invalid Stout, the Foster's product, that is a dry stout. So it's closer to Guinness than the stouts which we are tasting today. That said, Guinness actually do make an Imperial Stout, and it's called Guinness Foreign Extra. It's worth keeping a lookout for that. It appears occasionally.
Okay, now Gage, I know too you've got a bit of a beer in your bonnet, as ever. And what is the beer in your bonnet today?
The beer in my bonnet is... Sometimes it's hard to buy beer, even from big companies. I went to nearly 20 shops, bottle shops yesterday, to try and find some Southwark Stouts from South Australia, which is produced by Kirin. I actually even rang their head office in exasperation, couldn't get through to anyone, so we can't taste theirs, but we will taste the Cooper Stout up against the Cascade Stout. So I'm just saying we have to support these unusual beers, even from the big companies, because we need it for diversity, but they don't make it easy for us trying to find them.
Yeah, true.
Alright, so we are now at the end of our mashing. We've been sitting here for just over an hour. My temperature's held pretty much the entire time at 67 degrees, which is perfect. So we know we've done our job. I'm going to be testing that later on, but right now I'm going to start recirculation. Okay, it's a very simple procedure. Simply means I'm going to send some of the beer out of this tube into some of these little buckets down here, and I'm going to send them back into the top of my mash again. Now, why would I do that? Quite simply, I want to settle this grain bed that's inside here. I basically want to help create a better filter. So I get the beer out from the bottom, put it in the top, and we keep sending that process round until this beer runs clear. And I know that I'm not going to be sending any of those bits of rubbish, if you will, through to my brew kettle itself. So I'll get that started now. Really quite simple. We pull some of that into here. There you go. I'll just adjust that so it's not so fast. And then pop it into there. So as time goes on, this will start off with lots of chunks of grain and all sorts of bits in there. But as time goes on, that'll start to clarify. I'll probably run this process for about maybe 5 to 10 minutes, depending on how long I think I need to. So put that over there, and then simply swap to my second one. I'll slow this down a little bit, and then I'll pop this back in the top. Putting this little silver thing in here, this is going to help me to pour the liquid back in the top for recirculation. And what it's going to do, it's going to stop me from upsetting the grain bed by boring a hole into it when I'm pouring the liquids back in. So it's really quite simple. Right, so just a little step here, guys. What I'm going to do, I've done my recirculation. I'm happy that my beer is consistent throughout and the grain bed is settled. I'm basically going to take a little sample off of here, and I'm going to measure that before I run it into my kettle. And basically put it onto this little device here called a refractometer. Looks a bit scary. It's actually a really simple device. All it does is it measures the amount of sugars that I have in my beer. So between this measurement and the measurement at the end of sparging, which we're about to do, I can tell exactly when I'm going to hit my target of the right amount of sugars in my beer. Pretty simple stuff. These, by the way, pretty essential for all grain brewing. They're nice and cheap, only about 70 bucks, something like that. Okay, so let's start this runnings. Simply connect the tube, same as before. Purge it of any oxygen. Oxygen, by the way, is inherently our enemy, so we try and keep it out of the system as much as possible. And there she goes in there. I'm simply running that down into the bottom. I'm going to run that until about 1/3 full, and then I can fire up my engines and we'll be boiling this away. And then I'm going to add my sparging, which I'll explain to you in just a moment. Okay, so now we're going to start the sparge. We've run off enough of our first runnings into the kettle, and I'm about to fire that up. But first, I'll just add my custom-built sparge ring. This basically just means that I'm going to let some of my newly warmed liquor into the tank. There we go. Nice and gently. The idea being that this is going to chase all of the sugar water down the bottom and wash through this grain bed the whole way. So I start this and I'm going to measure this off by filling that at the same rate. So that's a continuous system that's flowing through the whole time. Okay, so let's get this boiler up and lighting. We'll see what we can do. Now, for those of you scared of gas, don't be. It's really quite simple. It's the same thing as you'd have on your barbecue. We've got a regulator on there, so we've got no worries whatsoever. I've got myself a little Mongolian burner down here. Quite a powerful little baby. Let's just hope she's not clogged up. Sounds good to me. And there we go. That's lit. So we'll run that flat out, and that's going to take probably the best part of 40 minutes to bring this all up to the boil. And then once we're boiling, we're going to move into the next step of hop additions.
Welcome back to the keg room. Now we're going to have a look at two imperial style stouts, locally made ones. We've got Cooper's Best Extra Stout and we've got Cascade Stout.
Cooper's are one of the most traditional brewing companies in the world. When they established, the two beers they first made were the Cooper Sparkling Ale, the Red Label, and the Cooper's Best Extra Stouts. They're still a family-owned South Australian business, or rather, I think it's an unlisted public company, but it's certainly family-dominated, and they were one of the last brewing companies in the world to actually make a lager. So really very old-fashioned. And Cascade's a little bit different. Cascade's part of Foster's, and Cascade makes 3 separate ranges of beers down in Tassie. They make their premium lager and their premium light, although I'm not sure how a light beer could actually be a premium. And this fits into their craft range of beers, and so a couple of these as well. They also make another stout, which typically Tasmanian. They don't export over to the mainland. So the beers, we've decided that both beers fit the characteristics of imperial stouts. The Cooper's is a 6.3% alcohol and the Cascade's 5.8. So Rob, what do you think of the Cooper's?
Well, the Cooper's, it's an excellent beer, really. Very complex nose. There's definitely a hint of coffee in the aroma there, but very complex, nice body to it, well carbonated. It's an excellent beer. I think that's a 4-star beer, really.
Well, I think it's a 4-star beer too. And in fact, I've often said that I think this is one of Australia's greatest beers. And it is, it definitely is. And it's because it's got so many layers of complexity and the components are so well integrated. So it's well balanced, it's lovely length, very intense flavours and loads of complexity. This isn't what you just have at on a cold winter's day, though. This goes well with desserts like chocolate flan. It's good food beer, or porterhouse steak. 4 stars, just on 4 stars.
Yeah. Now the Cascade Stout. You know, you go thinking, oh, it's not going to be anywhere near as good, but it's got. First thing that strikes you is it's got this pumpernickel rye sort of smell to it, as well as hints of coffee and very malty. Slightly more bitter than the Coopers, but it's still an excellent beer, I think. I think that's an excellent beer too. I can't fault it. I'm going to give that 4 stars as well.
Okay, well, yeah, I agree with you. It is quite different.
Yeah.
Stylistically, it is lighter body, lower alcohol, more bitter, but it still has the complexity. And the aromas are slightly different, but they're still just as good. No, look, I can't pick between either of those beers for a favourite, although they're quite different. I think that's a 4-star beer too. So I'm agreeing with you for a change. I think they're both very high quality beers.
Yes, excellent local stout.